Okay, picture this. It's the night of May 1st, 1866. Frances Thompson is in her home in South Memphis. She's a formerly enslaved woman. She sews, she does laundry, she's building a life. The war just ended. She finally has something that looks like freedom. Then 7 men kick in her door. 2 of them are wearing police stars. And what happens next, what she does about it, quietly changed the entire direction of American history, and almost nobody knows her name. Stay with me, because before I can get back to Frances, I need to show you how things got so bad that a city just ate itself alive in 3 days.
All right, let's talk about Memphis in 1866. Because here's the thing people always miss when they talk about this story. They jump straight to the violence, but if you skip the setup, the story doesn't make any sense. You need to understand the city first, because Memphis in 1866 wasn't just a southern town recovering from a war. It was a powder keg with a lit fuse, and everybody could smell the smoke. The Civil War ended in April 1865. Lee surrendered at Appomattox. The Confederacy was done. 13 months later, the Memphis Massacre happens. 13 months. That's how fast things collapsed after people were supposed to be celebrating peace. Now, Memphis was growing fast. Before the war, the black population of Memphis was around 3,000 people. By 1865, 20,000. Think about that for a second. The city's black population literally multiplied by 6 times in 5 years. Why? Because when Union forces captured Memphis in 1862 and set up Fort Pickering on the edge of town, word spread fast. If you could make it to Memphis, you could be free, or at least freer. Thousands of enslaved people from surrounding plantations made the run. Tennessee alone had 45,000 enslaved people in the counties immediately surrounding Memphis. Many of them came to the city during the war seeking the protection of Union soldiers. They set up camps, found work, built communities. They were trying to exist. And right alongside them, a very different group of newcomers was also staking their claim to Memphis: the Irish. Now, this is the part that most mainstream tellings of the Memphis Massacre completely skip over, and it's crucial. Starting in the 1840s, the Great Famine had driven Irish immigrants to America in waves. By 1860, Irish immigrants made up nearly 23% of Memphis's total population. That's almost 1 in 4 people. They had come from famine and absolute misery. They were at the bottom of American society. They faced serious discrimination, too. There's no question about that. But here's where it gets complicated. In the years of Union occupation during the war, former Confederates were banned from holding office. So who stepped in? The Irish. They had held themselves at arm's length from the war, and now they were the most fully enfranchised voting bloc in the city. By 1866, Irish immigrants held the mayor's office, most elected positions, and, critically, about 90% of the Memphis police force. 90% of the police force, Irish. And those cops had spent their whole careers policing black people under Tennessee slave laws. They were used to interacting with black residents from a position of total domination. They could do whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted, and nobody questioned it. Then, the war ended, and suddenly, armed black men in Union Army uniforms are patrolling the streets of Memphis. One historian put it this way: trying to have these Irish cops police black Union soldiers was like, and I'm quoting here, taking a troop of lions to guard a herd of unruly cattle. That is a description of a situation that was never going to end well. The Freedmen's Bureau, which was the federal agency set up to help formerly enslaved people transition to freedom, was filing reports throughout early 1866 about constant abuse. Black soldiers arrested for minor things, beaten in jail, treated brutally compared to white suspects. The Bureau kept warning, this city is going to blow. And then there's the economic layer, because the Irish and black Memphians weren't just politically clashing, they were directly competing for the same jobs, the same housing, the same social spaces. Working-class Irish immigrants and freed black workers were going after the same slice of a very small pie. Every time a freedman got a job, an Irish laborer felt that. Meanwhile, the white planter class, the old Confederate money, was watching all of this from a comfortable distance, and they had their own agenda. They wanted the formerly enslaved people out of Memphis and back on the plantations picking cotton, because cotton didn't pick itself, and they needed cheap labor to restart their economy. So, you've got a huge, newly arrived black population just trying to survive, an Irish immigrant police force used to abusing black people with zero accountability, competition for every job, every apartment, every corner of the city, old Confederate money pulling strings from behind the curtain. The Daily Avalanche, yes, that was actually the name of Memphis's newspaper, was publishing racist content daily, framing the growing black community as a threat to white Memphians. The city had a drunk for a mayor. His name was John Park, and he reportedly showed up to official events hammered. The police chief himself admitted he had basically no control over his officers. And the Union Army? Major General George Stoneman had been told by local officials, "Don't worry, we can keep order. We've got this." So he drew down his forces at Fort Pickering to about 150 men, 150, to police a city of 40,000 people sitting on a racial time bomb. So, the stage is set. Now here's the question that I want you to hold in your head as we move forward. When things finally blew, and they were absolutely going to blow, why did it happen on that exact day? What was the specific trigger? Because what actually lit the fuse is almost too small, and that's what makes this story so terrifying.
April 30th, 1866. The 3rd United States Colored Heavy Artillery, a regiment of black Union soldiers who had fought in the Civil War, were officially mustered out of service on that day, which means no longer soldiers, civilians, done. They were still living at Fort Pickering temporarily, still wearing their uniforms in some cases because they had no other clothes, but they were now officially just black men in Memphis, not protected by military status, not under the authority of the Union Army anymore, just free men in a city that didn't want free black men. That night, April 30th, the night before everything explodes, a group of police officers came walking down Causey Street. They ran into a group of black men on the sidewalk and forced them off, physically pushed them out of the way. One man fell. A cop stumbled over him. The police drew their revolvers and started pistol whipping people. Both groups separated. But, and this is documented in the Freedmen's Bureau report, they deferred the settlement by mutual consent to some future time. Translation, see you tomorrow. May 1st, 3 to 5 o'clock in the afternoon, South Street, South Memphis. A crowd of black men, mostly the recently discharged soldiers, has gathered. The Bureau report notes that several were noisy and boisterous and more or less intoxicated. These were men who had just been discharged. They were celebrating or processing or just existing in a neighborhood they lived in. Some were drunk, some were loud. 6 white police officers show up. 2 of them arrest 2 black men and start walking them away from the crowd. The others stay behind to keep back the crowd. Then, someone in the crowd tries to rescue the 2 men being arrested. Exactly who started the next moment is disputed. Accounts vary, but shooting breaks out. Here is the crucial detail. The first man killed in the Memphis Massacre was a black man named Stevens, and the surgeon who attended him concluded in the official report that he was shot by an accidental discharge of his own pistol. He basically shot himself in the chaos. The second man killed was a white man named Dunn, and the report says he was killed by a white man through mistake. So the opening shots of a 3-day massacre that would kill 46 people, accident, friendly fire, chaos. But it didn't matter, because the moment shooting started, every simmering tension in that city got permission to go active. Within hours, mobs were forming, not just random people either, organized groups of white men and police officers moving through South Memphis. And here's where it stops being a riot and becomes something far more deliberate, because these mobs had a system. They were going door to door. They would surround a home. They'd demand to be let in. If no one let them in, they'd break down the door. Inside, they'd rob everything of value: money, clothes, jewelry, food. They'd beat the occupants. If there were men present, especially men who looked like they might have served in the military, they killed them. And then they'd set the house on fire. The fire department, by the way, was also largely Irish. They showed up to fires in black neighborhoods and watched. Sometimes the firemen joined the mob. The Freedmen's Bureau report describes firemen actively participating in the looting and arson. And here's the question, the second open loop I want you sitting with. The Union Army was right there. Fort Pickering was on the edge of South Memphis. General Stoneman had soldiers. Why did it take 3 days for federal troops to intervene? Hold that. We're coming back to it, because the answer involves one of the most shameful institutional failures of the entire Civil War era, and it connects directly to a political fight happening in Washington that was reshaping America.
Let me walk you through the 3 days, not as statistics, as individual moments, because that's the only way this becomes real. Day 1, May 1st. The shooting on South Street was just the opening act. By evening, the mob had grown, and word had spread through the white community of Memphis like a fire of its own. The local newspapers, the Daily Avalanche, chief among them, had spent months framing the growing black population as a threat to white Memphis. Now those headlines were real to people who believed them. A black uprising was the rumor flying through white neighborhoods. The actual evidence suggested the opposite. It was black residents being attacked, but in an era with no real-time information, rumors were everything. At Fort Pickering, General Stoneman made a decision that still baffles historians. He ordered the black soldiers of the 3rd USHCA back inside the fort and told them to stand down. These were trained military men. They were armed. They could see their community being attacked from the fort's walls, and they were ordered to do nothing. Why? Because Stoneman worried that black soldiers fighting back would escalate things. He thought, incorrectly, catastrophically incorrectly, that if the black soldiers stayed calm, the mob would burn itself out. The mob did not burn itself out. Day 2, May 2nd. This is the day most historians consider the worst. The mobs were now operating in daylight with full confidence. Why? Because nobody stopped them on day 1. The Freedmen's Bureau report describes the scene in language that's almost clinical in horror. I'm going to paraphrase it because the original text is that disturbing. Houses were surrounded. Occupants who tried to run were shot in the streets. One woman, Rachel Johnson, was shot first and then thrown into the flames of a burning house. Her body was consumed in the fire. Another woman was forced twice through flames and somehow escaped. Some houses were set on fire, and then armed men stood outside, guarding the exits to prevent people from leaving alive. Let me say that again. They set houses on fire and posted guards to make sure no one got out alive. Henry Jackson, a black man who'd been in Memphis for a year, was just standing with a friend on May 2nd when a cop came by and without provocation grabbed him by the beard and beat him until blood ran down his clothes. No reason, just because he was there. And here's a detail that almost never makes it into the textbooks. Henry Porter, a black man who owned a grocery store in the neighborhood, witnessed the violence firsthand. He watched the murders, the arsons, the robberies. He knew the names of some of the perpetrators, white men he recognized from the neighborhood. He said so later in his congressional testimony. And, critically, he also watched white U.S. soldiers, supposedly sent to restore order, joining the mob. Not stopping it, joining it. The churches went first. Every single black church in Memphis burned.
4 churches, gone in 48 hours. Then the schools. Memphis had 8 black schools, 8 places where formerly enslaved people were learning to read, write, do math, skills that had been illegal for them to acquire just 2 years before. Every single one of those schools was burned to the ground, every last one. Think about what that means symbolically. The mob didn't just want to kill people, it wanted to destroy the infrastructure of black progress. You burn the churches, you destroy the community's spiritual center. You burn the schools, you cut off access to literacy and opportunity. You burn the homes, you eliminate housing and economic stability. It was systematic. And Mayor Park sat on his hands. When pressed on day 2 to request state or federal help, he refused. He would not ask for assistance. The city was officially ungoverned. Day 3, May 3rd. By the morning of May 3rd, the rampage had been going on for about 36 hours. The Freedmen's Bureau was frantically sending dispatches to Washington. The Congressional Committee would later describe what it found as almost incomprehensible. Finally, on the afternoon of May 3rd, General Stoneman declared martial law and sent troops, black and white, into the city. The mob dispersed almost immediately. That's the maddening thing. When the army finally showed up with real force, it was over in hours, which means it could have been over in hours on day 1. By the end, the final count, 46 black people killed, some estimates say 48. 2 white people killed, 1 by accident, 1 by friendly fire. At least 75 black people wounded, over 100 black persons robbed, 5 black women confirmed raped, the actual number was certainly higher, 91 homes destroyed, 4 churches burned, all 8 black schools gone. The economic loss in 1866 dollars was approximately $98,000. In today's money, that's over $1.8 million in property belonging to people who had nothing to start with. And here's what's going to get under your skin for the rest of this video. Not a single person was ever criminally prosecuted for any of it. Not one arrest, not one trial, not one conviction.
Okay, I promised you Frances Thompson back at the beginning. It's time. Frances Thompson was born enslaved in Maryland around 1840. She was enslaved by a family named Walker who, and this is documented, actually recognized her as a girl from childhood. She wore dresses. She presented as a woman her entire life. She walked with crutches because she had cancer in her foot. People in the neighborhood called her Crutchy. After emancipation, she made her way to Memphis and built something. She sewed, she took in washing and ironing. She had a small house on Gayoso Street. She had a roommate, a 16-year-old girl named Lucy Smith. She had a few $100 saved. She had a life. On the night of May 1st, the very first night of the massacre, 7 men came to her door. She knew 2 of them by their police stars. All of them were Irish. They demanded she cook for them. She did. She made eggs and ham and biscuits at 1 in the morning because 7 armed men told her to. Then they demanded more. They demanded a woman to sleep with. Frances refused. They drew their pistols. What happened next is in the congressional record. She testified to it herself, on the record, before a federal committee. She and Lucy were both attacked. Lucy was choked so violently that she couldn't speak for days afterward. Frances was beaten and violated by 4 of the men. They were in that house for nearly 4 hours. When they finally left, they took everything, roughly $300 in cash and savings, which is close to $6,600 in today's money. Everything she had built, gone in one night. She lay in bed for 3 days after. Now here's the layer most people don't know. Frances Thompson is believed to be the first transgender person to ever testify before the United States Congress. When the Congressional Committee convened at the Gayoso House in Memphis on June 1, 1866, Frances Thompson walked in on her crutches, took an oath, and told them everything, every detail.
She named the men as Irish. She said she could identify 2 of them as police officers by their stars. She spoke about what they did to her and to Lucy. She did not spare the committee anything. One historian called her one of the linchpins in getting the political will together to pass legislation to protect the civil rights of newly emancipated black people. Her testimony, and the testimony of others like her, was the firepower Congress needed to do what it was preparing to do. But here's where the story takes a brutal turn. 10 years later, 1876, Frances was arrested. The charge? Being a man dressed in women's clothing. Someone had outed her. She was forced to strip in front of officers, forced to take mugshots in both male and female clothing, forced onto an all-male chain gang. Local newspapers ran stories using her identity to try to retroactively discredit her testimony, as if being transgender meant she couldn't have been a victim of gang rape. She told police she had lived her whole life as a woman. She said she believed she was of double sex. She remained defiant even as they humiliated her. She was released from jail and died shortly after from dysentery in North Memphis. She was about 36 years old. And then there's Jane Sneed. Jane came to Memphis in 1862, one of the thousands who made it to the city during the war, seeking freedom. By 1866, she was living near Fort Pickering with her husband and her 14-year-old daughter, Rachel. In May 1st, Jane watched the initial clashes on the street. She saw the mob forming. She saw people being shot at. She got her family inside, and they tried to wait it out. On May 2nd, her daughter Rachel went outside to help a neighbor save belongings from a burning house. A white man shot her. Rachel Sneed, 14 years old, died that day. Jane testified to Congress about what she saw. Her voice is in the historical record because she was willing to risk retaliation to be heard. And these women, Frances Thompson, Jane Sneed, Lucy Smith, and others, gave testimony in a congressional system where black people generally could not testify in Tennessee state courts. Their federal testimony was their only avenue, and they took it. 170 witnesses testified to that congressional committee, most of them black, most of them risking everything to tell the truth. None of their testimony led to a single criminal prosecution. But, and this is the part that matters, their testimony led to something else entirely. Something that permanently changed what America was.
Why did it take 3 days for the Union Army to intervene? Here's your answer, and it's bigger than just Memphis. In the spring of 1866, there was a vicious political war happening in Washington, D.C. On one side, President Andrew Johnson. On the other side, the radical Republicans in Congress. Johnson, who was from Tennessee, who had been Lincoln's military governor, had a presidential Reconstruction plan. His plan was basically bring the southern states back in quickly with minimal conditions. Yes, slavery is over, but let the southern states manage their own affairs. Don't punish the Confederates too hard. Don't make too big a deal about black civil rights. In April '66, just weeks before the massacre, Congress had passed the Civil Rights Act of 1866 over Johnson's veto. It was the first time Congress had ever overridden a presidential veto on major legislation. The act declared that all people born in the United States were citizens entitled to equal legal protection. He hated it. He was trying to restore ex-Confederate governments across the South. He was actively working to limit black political participation. And General Stoneman, who delayed sending troops for 3 days, was operating in a political environment where the President of the United States was signaling that the federal government should back off from interfering in southern states.
Stoneman wasn't just incompetent, he was politically cautious. He didn't want to be the general who escalated a local disturbance into a federal military occupation that embarrassed the president's reconciliation policy. So the black residents of South Memphis burned. When news of the massacre hit northern newspapers, it detonated. The imagery of burned churches, burned schools, murdered veterans, raped women. It was everything the radical Republicans needed to make their case to the American public. This is what Andrew Johnson's lenient Reconstruction looks like, they said. This is what happens when you let the South manage itself. 2 months after Memphis, the New Orleans massacre happened. Same pattern, white police attacking black residents and their white Republican allies. Congress was done. The radical Republicans swept the 1866 midterm elections with a veto-proof majority. They took direct control of Reconstruction policy away from the president. They passed the Reconstruction Acts of 1867, which established military rule over the former Confederate states. They required those states to write new constitutions, granting black men the right to vote. They tied readmission to ratification of a new constitutional amendment, the 14th Amendment, which guaranteed, for the first time in the Constitution, that all persons born or naturalized in the United States were citizens, that no state could deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process, that all persons were entitled to equal protection of the laws. The testimony from Memphis, from Francis Thompson, from Jane Sneed, from Henry Porter, from 170 witnesses was read aloud in Congress. It was reprinted in newspapers across the North. It shaped public opinion in real time. The Memphis Massacre didn't cause the 14th Amendment by itself, but it was one of the most powerful catalysts that made it politically possible. Here's the cruel irony that nobody wants to talk about. The perpetrators of the Memphis Massacre, the cops who kicked in doors, the men who set fire to schools, the men who raped women, every single one of them walked free. Local authorities refused to prosecute anyone. Tennessee state courts weren't going to do it, and the federal government, despite having 170 witness testimonies and a 268-page congressional report, had no mechanism at the time to try them. The violence worked in the short term. The message was sent. Black progress in Memphis, the churches, the schools, the community organizations had been destroyed overnight. But in the long game, the violence backfired catastrophically for the people who planned it, because it handed the radical Republicans the political ammunition they needed to transform the Constitution itself. Here's the last thing I want to leave you with. The Memphis Massacre of 1866 was called a riot for a century, a race riot, as if it was two equal groups fighting each other, as if the 46 dead black people and the 2 dead white people were somehow comparable, as if burning every school and every church in a community was just what happens in a heated neighborhood dispute. Historians spent decades reframing it, fighting to call it what it was, a massacre, a pogrom, state-sponsored racial terrorism. The city's own police were the perpetrators. The mayor refused to stop it. The army delayed for 3 days. And it worked. For a generation, white supremacists in the South used the memory of Memphis and events like it as a weapon. You see what happens when you get too ambitious, when you build too much, when you try to vote, to own property, to carry a weapon, to walk on the sidewalk. Reconstruction, the brief, remarkable experiment in interracial democracy, was eventually crushed. By the 1870s and 1880s, the gains were being systematically rolled back. The 14th Amendment stayed in the Constitution, but its enforcement became a hollow joke for nearly a century. The schools that were burned in Memphis, some were rebuilt, some weren't. The families who lost everything, they never got a dime in reparations. Nobody was held accountable. Francis Thompson died at 36 in a North Memphis hospital, having been humiliated, outed, imprisoned, and forced onto a chain gang as punishment, essentially, for having the courage to testify. Jane Sneed buried her 14-year-old daughter. And here's what keeps me thinking about this story. The 170 witnesses who testified to that congressional committee knew there would be no criminal justice. They knew the men who attacked them were walking free in Memphis. They knew that testifying put them at risk of retaliation, and they showed up anyway. Because testimony matters even when the courts fail. Because having the truth in the historical record means something. Because sometimes you fight not for the justice you're going to receive, but for the world you're trying to build. The Memphis Massacre is one of the best documented episodes of 19th century American history. Stephen Ash, the historian who wrote the definitive book on it, called it that. 268 pages of congressional testimony, Freedmen's Bureau reports, newspaper accounts from both sides, affidavits, surgeons' reports. It's all there. And for most of American history, it was just ignored, left in archives, not taught in schools. Ironic, right? They burned the schools, and then history forgot to teach what happened. So, now you know. Share this, tell someone, because the people who testified in June 1866 did it hoping that someday someone would still be talking about what happened. We're still talking. If you want to go deeper on this, and I mean genuinely deep, Stephen Ash's book, A Massacre in Memphis, is the place to start. The congressional report itself is free online, all 268 pages. The National Museum of African American History and Culture has an incredible interactive archive of survivor testimony. Subscribe if you're not already, and seriously, thank you for watching all the way through this one.